B-17 Flying Fortress, the legendary bomber that once dominated the skies of World War II. They were assigned to restore it for a museum display, but their excitement faded when they saw an old man walk in wearing a worn-out jacket, a faded cap with a small silver wing pinned on it, and a cane that clicked against the concrete floor. He introduced himself as George, a volunteer who wanted to help with the restoration. The airmen exchanged glances and smirks to them. He looked too frail to even lift a wrench, let alone work on a warbird that once carried death and glory through enemy skies. "You sure you know what you're doing, old-timer?" one of them joked. George didn't answer. He simply smiled, set down his toolbox, and ran his fingers along the wing as if touching an old friend. The men chuckled behind his back, whispering that he probably just wanted to feel important. But George began working, slow yet steady, every movement precise, as if his hands remembered things his mind didn't have to recall. Hours passed, and he quietly corrected small details they hadn't noticed: the angle of a rivet, the pattern of a wire harness, even the paint tone of the nose art. When one of the airmen asked how he knew all that, George said softly, "I've seen enough of these up close." They laughed again, assuming he meant from watching war movies. Days turned into weeks, and the restoration started to take shape. The old bomber, once just a relic of rust and metal, began to look alive again. George came every morning at sunrise, often before the rest of the crew, polishing and restoring parts of the plane no one else paid attention to. He never bragged, never complained, just worked quietly with a look of memory in his eyes. One day, while the crew was eating lunch, George climbed inside the cockpit and sat in the pilot's seat. When they found him there, he wasn't pretending or playing. He was staring at the controls like a man looking at ghosts. One of the airmen sarcastically asked, "So, you flew one of these back in the day?" George's expression didn't change. "Yeah," he said softly. "A long time ago." The group laughed again until the hangar door opened and a black SUV pulled up outside. A man in full uniform stepped out, a colonel, his medals shining under the afternoon light. The room went silent. The colonel walked straight toward George, snapped to attention, and saluted. The young airman froze, unsure what was happening. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" the colonel asked. George nodded. "It's an honor to meet you again, Colonel Miller," George said with quiet respect. The colonel smiled and said, "No, sir, the honor's mine. I never thought I'd see you again after that mission over Schweinfurt." The airmen's jaws dropped. They realized this wasn't just some random old volunteer. George had been a B-17 pilot, one of the few who made it back from missions where half the crews never returned. The colonel turned to the group and said, "You boys have no idea who you've been working with. This man earned his combat wings before most of your grandfathers were born. He flew 25 missions in this very model, saved his crew more times than you can count, and brought home a crippled plane when everyone thought they were done for." The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the overhead lights. The airman looked at George with new eyes, not as an old man, but as a living piece of history. A warrior who had seen things they could only read about. George just smiled faintly. "I didn't do it alone," he said. "Good men didn't come home. This plane reminds me of them.